It looks so bad no matter where it is. Yeah, we'll just put it there. That's not weird. Okay, tell me something, and you can be honest with me. Is February 8th too late to upload a January wrap-up video? Asking for a friend. Hi, my name is Sarah Freshly, and welcome back to Freshly Read Books. Yes, that friend is me. I'm posting a January wrap-up on February 8th, as you know, because it says so below the video. What can you do? I mean, honestly, like, my whole video upload schedule is kind of out of whack right now, but I'm getting it back on track. I'm really close to getting it back to where I initially planned it being in. Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those videos, isn't it? I just knew that I still had to post this wrap up because I participated in the Among Us Readathon, which was a month-long readathon in January, and I wanted to share how I did because there's going to be another round of it, so I want, you know, this to be like, I did round one and this is how I did. So anyways, let's do this. If you watched my my haul video that I did not too long ago, then you'll know that I didn't read any books in December. So I guess I was kind of making up for it in January because I read 11 books this month, which I guess actually isn't like too crazy out of the norm for me, at least in like quarantine time, but it still feels like I accomplished a lot, so I'm going to think about it that way. Before we get to the books, just to talk about like what the readathon is, if you haven't heard about it, the Among Us Readathon is a readathon that's based off of the game Among Us, which is a little indie game that came out a bit ago, but has just blown up in popularity. I hadn't heard about it until like everybody was playing it just recently, but I have since played it. I love it. I highly recommend it if you haven't played it. It's so much fun. I just love hidden identity games in general. Even though I turn into like this little ball of nerves, even if I'm not playing the imposter, like I don't get it. It's just like I get nervous somebody's going to think that I'm the imposter. But if you haven't played the game, basically all that you need to know for this readathon is that it centers around like this ship and there's a bunch of crewmates on it. At least one of the crewmates is an imposter who is trying to kill all the other crewmates. So the goal of the crewmates is to accomplish a bunch of these tasks and also to figure out who the imposter or imposters are. And then the goal of the imposter, of course, is to kill the crewmates and to make sure that they can't be found out. So they like kind of pretend to do these tasks that the crewmates have to do, so that it looks like they're still, you know, getting stuff done and they're just a regular crewmate. But then on the side, they're like killing people. So for this readathon, you can choose to be any crewmate. All the crewmates are like different colors. So there's like green and lime. And I just named the 2 green ones. Blue and brown, and there's just, it's all the colors basically. But you get to pick one of the crewmates to be, and each of the crewmates has like different prompts that they're supposed to be reading for the readathon, and different numbers of prompts as well. So for example, like maybe the green crewmate has to read like 8 books, whereas the white crewmate has to read like 3 or something. Actually, that's why I chose this Keith Haring shirt, because it's got like different colored people on it. So, but anyways, you can choose to be one of the crewmates, or you can choose to be the imposter, which may or may not have been what I did. The imposter is the hardest one to do for this readathon, as they have to read at least 12 books. So you're probably looking at the title of this video, and also I've already told you that I read 11 books in January. So you already know that I didn't make it. And I could have lied. I could have said that I picked some crewmate that had to read like 8 books, but I can't do that. I can't do that to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I picked the imposter. Why? Who knows? One of the books I read didn't even count. And I knew that before I decided to be the imposter. I found out about the readathon like on the 6th of the month, and I'd already read 2 books by then, and the first book that I read couldn't even count towards this thing. And still, I was like, I could probably still read 12 books. 13 technically, because the one that, you know. Okay, yeah, so not great decisions were made, but they were my decisions, and here we are. Okay, so this readathon started off with 2 prompts. It was like an either-or situation. Once you finished that first thing, then all of the other prompts you could do in any order, but you had to start with either reading a sequel or reading a standalone book. Yeah, and the first book that I read in January was just this little 800-page book called Dune, which is both not a sequel and also not a standalone book because it's the first book of a series. Yeah, this book didn't count, purely just because you had to do that prompt first. So if I had read this book after I read any of the other books that I read this month, then it totally would have counted for some other prompt. But because it was the first book I read, it didn't count. However, we're still obviously going to talk about it because this is a January wrap-up video. Dune is by Frank Herbert and is widely considered to be the classic sci-fi novel. It's incredibly famous. It takes place on this planet called Arrakis, which is basically all desert, and it has no water, and it follows the character Paul. He's the protagonist, and he's a teenager throughout this book. I think he starts at 14 or 15 years old. But basically Paul ends up living on Arrakis with his mother, and you find out that he's kind of destined to be something big and impactful for the people that live on Arrakis. This book was really neat, and it had just impressive world building in general. I feel that's the main point of it. That's why it's so large. The other books in the series are not this big. I mean, there's some that are big, but not this big. To be fair, there's 100 pages of appendices. I feel this is a flashback to the Lord of the Rings video, and I was trying to say the same word. But yeah, there's 100 pages of those, but still, overall, 800-page book. I was not counting those when I said 800 pages, and I read those, so technically I read 900 pages that didn't count, which just makes me look sillier. It's a good book. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the world building probably more than I enjoyed the story itself, although the story is definitely still interesting. It's a little slow to start, but it gets a lot more fast-paced as it goes on, and I will definitely be continuing in the series. I'm interested to see where it goes. Okay, next up, and the first book that actually counts in the Among Us Readathon, I read One by One by Ruth Ware, which is, of course, a standalone novel. So this is a thriller that centers around a social media company that's pretty small, but they've made this app that's like social media for music. Yeah, that's an accurate description. The company, or the employees, are going on a trip to a ski lodge, to stay in this chalet together, and also to kind of make this big business decision, which is whether or not to sell the company in general. So there's not really that many people that are in the company, and they kind of have these two different paths that they can go down, which makes it pretty interesting because there are people that are firmly on either side. And then our story follows the perspective of two different characters. One is one of the people that did work for the company, but she no longer does, but she's on this because she is a shareholder, and it kind of comes down to her and her decision, even though she doesn't have that many shares in the company. And then also the other person's perspective that we're following is a worker in the chalet. So there's two workers, a chef, and then the person, I don't even know what her job description would be. She both cleans and organizes, I guess, but also she helps them through, what the ski routes are and that kind of thing. Ski routes is probably not the right term. What is it? Black diamond slope, ski slopes. Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of the word slope. Ooh. So, talking to them through, the different ski slopes that they could go on and, how to get where and all this stuff, which actually is, pretty confusing at the ski resort, it sounds like. But I'm going to be talking about this book more when I do my Ruth Ware video very soon, because I've nearly finished all of Ruth Ware's books. So I'll be talking a lot more about my thoughts on it, but just overall, so that you know, I do recommend this book. It was very good. As a thriller, it hit all the right spots for me. I love thrillers that have this element of survival in them. There's this avalanche that hits and they're all stuck in this chalet. That's a big part of the story. So I like when survival and like nature plays a role in a thriller, but also it's got that element of being like a closed cast of characters, which I love that as well. And we've only got 2 perspectives. I don't love when it gets to being like a bunch of different perspectives and you're in there, like it's POV. I either like it to stay in 3rd person or to stick to like 1, 2, maybe 3 perspectives for thrillers. I don't like when they get to be like so many different perspectives, unless it's done really well. Every once in a while you get one and you're like, all right, it was okay that you wrote it this way. It's always okay that they wrote it this way. This is completely personal preference. But anyways, I would recommend that book for sure. Okay, so now that we've made it past like what the first prompt is for the Among Us Readathon, any of the other prompts can be read in any order. As the imposter, I had to read 2 prompts that were kind of separate from like killing crewmates, which was me just doing imposter things basically. Like the first task I did was supposed to represent me faking a task and like pretending that I'm just a normal crewmate. And then these next 2 are like blaming somebody else and then using the ventilation system, which is like to get around the ship easily to get away from my last victim or something like that. So I had 2 prompts for both the vent and to blame somebody. And then also you need to complete 9 other prompts. You basically have to kill 9 crewmates, and to kill a crewmate you need to read one of their prompts. So that's at least 9 books there. So basically overall 12 prompts, the 9 plus the 2 plus the 1. Does that make sense? I hope it did. So first, what I did first was kill the cyan crewmate by reading a book that was over 500 pages, which was Apeirogon by Colum McCann. I should like be holding that. Here it is. So I read Apeirogon by Colum McCann. This is one of the books from the Booker 2020 long list, which of course I've been reading for quite some time now. But I hadn't read this one yet, and I finally got to it. Technically I started it a bit ago, but I was able to actually get through the whole book this time. Not because it's like not good, it's a very good book, it's just really heart-wrenching. I had to be like in the right frame of mind to be reading this in general because it would just like tug at your soul. This book is about Bassam Aramin and Rami Elhanan, who are Palestinian and Israeli respectively. They both lost their daughter due to the conflict between their 2 countries, like each of their daughters, and then through that they met each other and became friends. And now they kind of like go around the world giving speeches about their experience, and then they worked with Colum McCann to tell their story through this book, Apeirogon. So if you want to hear more about what this book is about, I recommend Kieran from Katie Books, his videos on it. He did 2, one on the controversy around Colum McCann and then the other one about Apeirogon in general. I recommend checking both those videos out. They were done like so well, so definitely look at those. The links will be in the description to them. Next, I read a book for the prompt, a book that I think could surprise me, which was to use the vent, which is one of like the imposter tasks that doesn't involve killing somebody. This was kind of hard because how do you pick a book that you think is going to surprise you? But I went with one that I guess had like strong preconceived notions about beforehand. Okay, so I picked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because by Taylor Jenkins Reid, because I have read Daisy Jones and the Six, which was a very hyped book by Reid, and I thought I didn't like it. I thought I didn't like it. No, I didn't like it. I started one sentence and then I did another sentence. I didn't really like Daisy Jones and the Six at all, and for reasons I'll get into at another point. I plan on doing a video that's more all-encompassing of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, but I didn't really like Daisy Jones and the Six, but my book club was reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and that was also an overhyped book. So I was like, I mean, technically this book does have the ability to surprise me if I like it, because it's another book by the same author that's also really hyped. And turns out it did surprise me because I actually did really like The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The premise around the book, it follows a young journalist named Monique who is writing kind of this full-length book biography, that's what those are called, on Evelyn Hugo. So she meets with her Evelyn tells her whole life story. She was like this famous actress her whole life. She famously had 7 husbands, and she's given her like the lowdown on all of it and telling like the truth about all these things for the first time ever. Through this, Monique is able to kind of learn more about herself and what she wants in her life and how to like stand up for herself more, which is really sweet. That's not spoilers, it happens like right away. But just overall, their interactions, it was good. Like overall, it was just a very good contemporary book. You want to go out there, bud? Okay. Bye-bye. All right. Next, as the imposter, I killed the pink crewmate by reading a book with a plant on the cover. For this, I chose the House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende, which has this like coppery plant pattern all over the front. This I talk about so much more in depth in my chili video, which is coming out a week from when this is released. So what is that, like the 14th or something? Is that Valentine's Day? Oh, my chili video is coming out on Valentine's Day. I didn't even say Happy Valentine's Day in it. Oh wait, I still can. I haven't finished filming stuff for that. But I think this is the first area where I will be able to say that isn't just like my Instagram story, but the footage for that, I had an issue with it. I talk about it a little bit more in the video itself. So it was initially supposed to come out a week ago today, and now it's coming out a week from today. That's not the 14th, is it? That's the 15th. It's not even Valentine's Day. Like that was ever the plan. But anyways, I go way more into detail about this there, but just as like a quick overview what it's about it's this generational, multi-generational tale about this family where we see like several generations deep. There's also some magical realism elements, more emphasis on the realism than the magical. But like spirits, premonitions, that kind of deal. And also gets into like a little bit of politics, things like that. It's a good book. I would recommend this one as well. It gets a thumbs up from me. Next, I killed the blue crewmate by reading a book with a person on the cover. People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. This is a thriller. It was actually in my most anticipated releases of 2021. It came out in January. This book is about a woman who makes her living Instagramming about her life as a mom, about her kids, and just all of that. It was actually kind of like an interesting take on it because it was more like she was known for being like the mom that doesn't have it all together, so she actually prefers to have like a little bit messier pictures and stuff like that, but it's still very curated to get to that level. So it was still really interesting to like read about that, I guess. But overall, I wasn't a huge fan of this book. Did I say it's a thriller? It's a thriller. But like nothing happens for at least 100 pages. And I don't normally mind that in thrillers, but this book is a very short one. And so having 100 pages with like nothing at all thrilling happening is pretty boring, honestly. Especially when you have those expectations going into it. If this was just like a book about an Instagram mom and I read those first 100 pages, then maybe I wouldn't mind so much. But also I don't think I would have picked it up then, because that doesn't sound like a story that I'd like. So this is actually told from 2 perspectives, the mom and the dad. So the dad doesn't like fully understand the Instagram thing, but he does know that like they owe a lot of their livelihood to it. He's an author, so I did like the comparisons between like, well, she's writing these posts every day and like she would have, you know, long posts about like big things happening in her life and everything, but he like writes books, and that comparison and like the voice she kind of has to put on when she's writing like a post for Instagram, and it bleeds into the way that she talks through like her points, the times where it's from her point of view. And it's honestly infuriating. I did not like reading it. I understand. I think that that's the point. It's supposed to be insufferable, but you know, it is insufferable, and it's like half of the book. So the other half, technically it's not half and half. There is a third perspective. I'll get to that in a second. Is her husband, so the father of the kids that are being like their whole lives are being shown on Instagram. Who is an author. He was a little bit easier to read, but even at certain points I really didn't like him either. And then also there's a third perspective, which is like the villain of the story, which is really the only reason why there's anything that even alludes to it being a thriller at the beginning of the book. Otherwise, like, you could read the first 100 pages and be like, this isn't a thriller. I will give it credit though. At the end, it definitely got a lot darker than I thought it was going to get based off of where the book started. So I think that like the second half of the book was pretty good. Still though, I don't know if I would recommend it, knowing like how much you have to get through of the beginning. I was just already like so infuriated by the end of it that I didn't really care about the characters, which unfortunately leads to me not caring as much about the plot when it's a thriller. So yeah, I don't think I recommend this book. I'm sorry. I don't like to be mean to books, especially when they just came out. But it was a book of the month book. It's doing fine, right? Like, I can say negative things about that book. Okay, I just let Scout out of the room and now she wants back in. Come on. Okay, next I killed a yellow crewmate by reading an author I had never read before, which I used for that one, The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. This is another book that was for my chili video, which, as I said, I'll go more into depth about in that video, but as a kind of quick overview, how do you give this book a quick overview? It's about this group of poets called Visceral Realists, and they are looking for another poet that has once used the term kitty? Where was I? It's about this group of poets that call themselves the Visceral Realists, and they are looking for another poet who once used the term visceral realist, so they want to find her. And it's about so much more than that. Oh my gosh, seriously, this is such a bad description. Like, technically, all that's true. But there's just a lot more to it. So, like, please watch the chili video and never reference this as a review of this book. Overall, how did I feel about it? Even those are very complicated. I liked it. Great writing. Very dense. Very challenging read. Please just watch the chili video when it comes out for more, because my goodness. Okay, then I killed a green crewmate by reading a graphic novel. For this one, I went with March Book 3 and finished the March trilogy. This trilogy follows John Lewis and his involvement in the civil rights movement in the US. And it's written by him, but also by Andrew Aydin and Nate Powell. Nate Powell is the artist for the book. And it's done so well. Like, it's kind of surprising to have a topic like this one told through a graphic novel, but I think they did such a good job with it. Each of the books in this trilogy follows kind of this different, huge historical moment in the civil rights movement, but also that John Lewis was a part of. Not that they only follow that, it's just that they kind of center around this, like the climax of each book. So the first one focuses on the sit-ins, the second one focuses on the Freedom Riders, and this third one focuses on Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. You can easily tell that the three books were written together, like at the same time, so that it completes this full loop. By the time you get to the third book, it feels like the first two build to this one, and it was really, really good. I learned a lot that I didn't know about, or even was like reminded about things that I like remember vaguely from history class, but got to see it from a new perspective. Having the art along with it really adds a lot. And I would highly just recommend it to people to read. Out of anything that I read in January, this is the one, and like the trilogy as a whole, would be the one that I would recommend the most. Because they're graphic novels, they're super accessible to read, but they teach you so much. And also, it's not even just about John Lewis. Like, because so many people were so heavily involved in this story, you learn about other people and their involvement, which led to me like Googling different people and speeches, and like I learned so much, not just by reading these books, but because of these books and what they, like the Googling path, I guess, that they sent me down. I would just so much recommend reading this trilogy. Next, I went after the Orange Crewmate by reading an LGBTQ plus rep book. So for that I did I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This follows twins Jude and Noah as they're kind of growing up or growing through their teenage years. I think it is technically a YA, but I will say that I don't typically read YAs, and this one doesn't have the problem that I feel like a lot of YAs have, which, for me anyways, which is just like the tone of voice that like the teenagers use, and it just all sounds like way out of their depth and like oddly philosophical a lot of the times. But for this one, I didn't feel like it really had that air to it. So Jude and Noah are both very artistic, but Jude, her story, like, because it's told from both their perspectives, Jude's story is a little bit more about her understanding like the artistic perspective, I guess, that she has, or what kind of art that she wants to create, and being more accepting of herself as like being an artist, I guess, because Noah is more often looked at as like the artistic one in the family. He's really into sketching and painting, and there's more emphasis put on him and his art, especially early in the book, that even I as a reader didn't fully realize that Jude was as into art as she is. And then Noah's story is more about him coming to terms with the fact that he is gay and what that looks like in his family, and being able to talk to other people about it in general, as well as his first relationship with a guy, or really first relationship at all, I guess. But you kind of get these parallel stories that are so intertwined, and it's done really, really well. You get kind of two different time periods between Jude and Noah, which is really neat. And I loved reading from Noah's perspective, because he does this thing where he like paints landscapes in his mind about certain situations, and it's really about his feelings about situations or about people that he's talking to in the moment. And so he just like kind of retreats inward and like has this moment where he's just talking about like a sketch or a painting of these feelings, and it sounds weird, but it's done really well, and I thought that it added to the story so much. I really liked that. And then I went for the Brown Crewmate by reading a TBR veteran. So for this I went with Armageddon in Retrospect by Kurt Vonnegut, which is like a collection of short stories that all kind of revolve around war, both World War II, which is the war that Vonnegut himself was in, but also just like from a more abstract point of view, or like in a sci-fi world. Those kinds of stories were in here too. And then there's also some illustrations, both by Vonnegut himself and then some family members. This is actually the book that's been on my TBR for the longest. I have the receipt from when I got it in 2014. But yeah, it was, overall, I don't think I like it as much as the, what is the other short story collection I read by him? Welcome to the Monkey House. That short story collection I really, really liked by him. It's one of my favorite things that he's done, is like that collection of short stories. So this one was still good, but like it was a collection of unpublished short stories that were published after his death by his son, Mark Vonnegut. So I understand why I didn't like this as much. Clearly, like, they didn't make it to being published, and that doesn't mean they're not good, because a lot of them are. I think I even wrote down specifically which ones I liked in case you pick this up and you're curious. The Unicorn Trap was really, really good. The Commandant's Desk, Just You and Me, Sammy, was good. I think that those of all of them were my favorites, and the other ones, like, they were good. They were not entertaining, but like interesting while reading them, I guess. As I've said in the past, I love Kurt Vonnegut's writing style, so basically I'll always enjoy the process of reading his books or his short stories. It's just, not all of them can be my favorite. This one probably isn't that. If you're considering reading a short story collection by him, I would highly recommend Welcome to the Monkey House. It's very good. Okay, I have one last book to talk about, which was another one for like an imposter task, which was supposed to represent like blaming somebody else. And for that, you needed to read a book with a morally gray character. For this, I went with Bringing Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel, the second book in the Wolf Hall trilogy, because I think that Thomas Cromwell is a very morally gray character. And I really just, I had to finish Bringing Up the Bodies. Bring Up the Bodies, not bringing. I had to finish Bring Up the Bodies because I have been reading it forever. I mean, I started reading it forever ago and I just haven't finished it. But I've gotten there. I finished it. And I did like it more than Wolf Hall, I think, just because I more understood, I guess, what was going on. So that helped. But yeah, I found it a lot more accessible than Wolf Hall in general, at least for me. I'm not big on reading historical fiction. I tend to try to stay away from it as much as possible. It's not my genre. But The Mirror and the Light, which is the third book in the Wolf Hall trilogy, is a book that's on the Booker 2020 long list, which is the long list I said that I was going to read all of the books from. And I wanted to read all of the books of the trilogy because I wanted The Mirror and the Light to make the most sense to me, you know? I wanted to like give it the background that it deserved, which of course is the two books that came before it. Also, Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies both were Booker Prize winners. So like, it's nice to be able to say I've read them now. But it was all in order to be able to read The Mirror and the Light and to complete the Booker 2020 long list. So I still have, 3 books of that left. Who They Was, Redhead by the Side of the Road, and The Mirror and the Light, of course. So 1 step closer this month. Actually, 2 steps closer this month, because I finished Bring Up the Bodies and Apeirogon, which was actually on the list. Anyways, I haven't even talked about what Bring Up the Bodies is about. Thomas Cromwell, who served under sounds like a U.S. president thing. He served Henry VIII, and it kind of just like follows Cromwell's career. I mean, a little bit of his life, but it focuses on his career. I think Morally Gray sums him up pretty well. I feel like it's like the definition of morally gray. Honestly, I'm not doing a great job of describing this book, but it's historical fiction. Seriously, it's so far out of my comfort zone. Okay, so I performed all of the imposter tasks that I needed to perform, including, of course, the first task overall, and then I killed 7 crewmates. Is that right? Yeah. Yes. But I needed to kill 9. So I only got 1,000 points in this readathon. If I had just read 2 more books and killed 2 more crewmates, I would have gotten to 2,700 points, because you get like 1,500 extra points for just like doing all the things that your like character is supposed to do. But because I only killed 7 crewmates, I got 1,000 points out of it. So far less than half of what I would have gotten if I just read 2 more books. I really tried at the end there. I was like, what are the shortest books I have that I can get there? And that's actually why I picked up Armageddon in retrospect, was because it was small. And that was why I wasn't planning on reading March in January. I was planning on reading it this month originally, but I was like, well, graphic novel, that's like a prompt I can get pretty easily. I can get through it quickly. Actually, this ended up taking me, I read it in a day, but it just took longer than I thought. It's a lot to process, and I did a lot more Googling than I thought I was going to during it. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. But anyways, I got 1,000 points. I have no idea what that means, but there's going to be a round 2 at some point. It was a great readathon to participate in. I'm sad that I wasn't a very good imposter. I was a decent one. I just didn't kill 2 people. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for this video. Did you read any of these books that I had listed out here? What were your thoughts on them? Are there any that you are hoping to read or that you didn't know about until this video? Hopefully you enjoyed the video as a whole, and if you did, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!